In this squat video, I'll be discussing what to do with the positioning of your feet, the angle of your toes, and what the knees should be doing when we squat down. When it comes to the relationship of the toe angle and the direction of the knees, we are faced with approximately 3 options to choose from. When we squat down, we can position ourselves so that the toes point straight ahead and the knees stay in line with the toes, also pointing straight ahead. The next option is that we can keep the toes pointing ahead, but we can push the knees outwards. And lastly, we can point the toes outwards, and when we squat down, make sure that the knees are also pointing outwards in line with the toe angle. Now, the approach that I take, and the one that I use in my own lifting and with clients, is that when I squat down, I place my heels approximately under my shoulders, I turn my toes out to around 30 degrees, and then I squat down. As I squat down, I shove my knees out so that they track in line with the toes. That stance, knee and foot position, is my standard go-to whenever I coach someone, and unless I need to modify it, I'll pretty much stay with that adjustment for around about 90% of people. Of course, I understand that different systems and other videos you may have seen show other positions, the ones I described earlier, where the toes and the knees may be facing in different directions. So what I'll do now is break down with a bit more detail why I don't use those options as a first choice. So let's explore these different leg positions, and as we go through, I'll explain why I use the one that I do and why I suggest you use it. So one option when we squat down is that the knee will bend and the toe will stay in line, and the knee is going to track forwards directly ahead of you. Now when this occurs, you can see on the skeleton here, as I start to bring the leg up, eventually the bone here, the femur, is going to start to get closer and closer to the hip, this part of the body here. Now, of course, on top of the leg, on top of the femur, there's a series of muscles that sit on top of this section here, and you can feel these on your leg, the quadriceps. At the top of them, the tendon attachments that fix them onto the skeleton. And as the leg starts to travel in a forward direction, up and closer as you bend the knee to squat down, you can notice that these tissues start to travel closer to the hips. And so with the knee in a forward position, as you squat down, these muscles and tendons of the femur here on the front side start to get closer to the bony bump, the hip pointer here, and there is a potential that this can start to mash down into these and cause some discomfort if you continue to do so. Not to say that in every instance that will always happen, but it is anatomically possible, and so generally I want to counter against that, which is why I suggest shoving the knees out, so the outward knee angle as you squat down eliminates that contact from happening here if we shove the knees out. Now another option was to have an angle where the knee would be shoved out but the toes would point ahead, and again you will see some people using this. I prefer not to, because the joint of the knee is a hinge joint. Imagine a pair of scissors. They're designed to open and close, but they don't move laterally very well, and it disturbs that joint that fixes them together. And the knee has a similar relationship. It really wants to open and close like the hinge of a door, but lateral movement from left to right is not what the joint really wants to do. So although you can see it, although it is used and in some texts it's recommended, I prefer to avoid that issue of creating unwanted torque at the knee joint with one section of the limb facing one way and the other facing in another direction for that reason. And so the method that I recommend, that I use in my own training and with the people I coach, and that seems to cancel out the first 2 issues I mentioned, is to bring the distance of the heels to be about under the armpits, under the shoulder, turn the toes out to around 30 degrees, and then when you squat down, bring the leg out, shove the knees out, and then that risk of this area here coming in contact with the hips is removed, and so is any issue of abnormal turning at the knee, which might be a problem. Thank you for watching the video. I hope the tips in here have been really useful for you. If you're still struggling or have some questions about your training, you can reach out to me via my website, strengthrevolution.org, for in-person or online coaching.